Hello and welcome to part 5 of this series. In this installment, we'll be taking a hypothetical tour of a public school. Whether you like or dislike it, no part of academics is small. The leaders we elect in government, the role models that hold our respect, familiar people we interact with every day, the way that most of these view the world has been influenced through schooling. Academics, therefore, has an unparalleled control over our future. So if we do not examine the subject and its institutions to see if it is accomplishing what it is supposed to, then we are consigned to not knowing if our future is in the hands of those we want it to be. Personal opinion and condescension are not required to do this, nor can they withhold against the truth once it has been established, unless the opinion is simply that examination is needed and its results respected. To simulate this examination, let us take a tour of a hypothetical public school and see how it operates. The building itself looks like most other government productions. If someone wanted to study modern educational architecture, they would find it along the same lines as a juvenile detention center, courthouse, or hospital. The doors open. There's a long hallway through which students are shunted by the thousands. Endless tiles and fluorescent lighting, communal tables with attached stools. It is emotionless. There might be temporary artwork on display, a donated armchair in the poetry room, or a greenhouse for the gardening class. But this doesn't give every student a comfortable place to sit or a few minutes of sunlight during the day. What appear to be comforts and signs of vitality are merely paper and string attached to the permanent concrete. Then there's the classroom, the site where learning is supposed to take place. I can't remember ever having a classroom with windows unless the glass was an opaque mustard color. There are no distractions and therefore no comforts. Rows of alphabetized desks sit surrounded by empty space, providing maximum exposure. The room is designed to have no shadows. The exposure reveals every difference and inconsistency a student has at an age in which the student is most vulnerable. Since the student has nothing else to do, it seems to be the theory that only schoolwork will enter his mind, which, of course, is a fantasy, just as it's an illusion that every student will be monitored by the instructor at all times. By thinking they can remove infractions entirely, this exposure promotes bullying and all kinds of peer abuse in the fleeting minutes the teacher is ignorant or absent, with predators quickly learning how to avoid reprimand. It is a method that depends on teachers being completely without negligence, which no one is. Students become active and restless during these lapses because they have a need for diversion that is not otherwise provided. Instead of trying to understand this behavior, the school responds by increasing observation even further, thinking there is no unwatched place left for it to occur, forcing the damage into a repressed form within the student instead of between students. Since every intelligent person can be expected to think beyond their limited surroundings, what then will the thoughts be that are spawned by this repression, confinement, and selective inattention? Beyond the physical aspects of the school, our visitor begins to see evidence of policy. I can remember one day in high school hearing an announcement over the intercom that went something like this: "It has come to our attention that students have been seen kissing in the main hallway. This is not allowed and will be punished with detention." It's difficult for me as an adult to look back and understand how something that happens every day in any high school, because of a single observation by an employee, becomes law, which, if it happened outside the school system, would involve judicial authority and spark a debate over right to privacy. I don't think anyone knows where the law ends and the policy of a higher department begins. But when freedom of speech, assembly, or religion are infringed, there are unforeseen consequences. The principle acts like the captain of a ship at sea, a container situation where you might have to declare martial law without consulting the appropriate sources, when in fact he is in charge of a facility that is within a larger community stable enough to absorb things like civil disobedience. A squabble between two citizens is not summarily punished on the spot, but resolved through mediation where each side is represented. In previous segments, I gave some examples of academicians trying to overreach their authority, which makes the news every year. Here's another one. Faculty are calling for a dress code for parents while on school grounds. In what legal system can I say to someone, I don't like what that person is wearing, let's do something about it? The year I graduated high school, there was a notice posted that no students would be allowed to graduate if they had overdue library books. An interesting display of the school's priorities. There are things students do and think that are more important than what a teacher wants at a particular moment. A truly ego-bruising revelation. And what if they can't do the things they would prefer? It leads to frustration and displeasure. In an earlier chapter, I asked the question, what do you do if a student cannot be taught? One possible answer is, every student can be taught. But those who insist this may automatically exclude certain groups from their field of vision. The appropriate response is, not every student can be taught by you. Usually, when a student is not learning, no one knows. There is no accurate measure of what is going on in a student's mind. But when a student repeatedly fails in class, the administration sees this as a problem and takes action, such as transferring him indefinitely from one course to another until his performance changes. There is always another way is the attitude, even though the message the student is receiving is probably reiteration. It's our way or the highway, a process shaped like a funnel. When this fails, they wash their hands of the problem by expulsion, forgetting the matter and taking no responsibility for the effect this will have on the rest of the student's life. So, what is the answer? Should a student be punished, neglected, abandoned? The first response of an educator should be to ensure the student is spared from any mistreatment they may suffer while this decision is being formulated. For example, if you consider the student's life and well-being to be more sacred than his performance in chemistry class, then there is no danger of expulsion, only inconveniences in that particular class. Sparing them from this may itself lead to the right path, or it might reveal something more serious. Academicians will concede that some students belong in public school and some don't, but even this is misleading. Public schooling does not cater to the individual. Academics is the practice of educating en masse. Program caters less to the individual than in any other form of education in this country, a lack of personal attention being the reason why many abandon it for other methods. Knowing that each child is born with a unique mind and needs, no two forms of education ideally suited for them will be the same. The chances are infinitesimal for a student to receive the method specifically tuned to him in a class where the teacher knows nothing about him and employs a formula meant to educate a group of 30. By enrolling him, the school is basically rolling the dice, hoping for a match to his educational needs. Education is a craft, and it doesn't take a philosophy or preference to recognize when no crafting is taking place. Teachers are not given the time or authority to do this. Learning is not an allotment dispensed like rations. The reason any student succeeds in public school is their incredible resilience. Let's take a brief look at our hypothetical school's curriculum. In the interest of time, this is not a complete anti-curriculum, nor is it meant to tell qualified instructors their own business. There is much more to each of these subjects than what I can make of them, but some of them come with specific problems and solutions, and the one that usually comes to mind is math. Very few students entering the school system have a passion for math, which makes it one of the most difficult subjects to get them interested in. And yet it is preserved when classes like art and music are cut, because a background in math is considered more likely to help students find well-paying jobs in the future. Hence the rather self-serving mantra, math is power. Someone came up with this phrase to compensate for something. In mathematics, there's no such thing as a slogan. Everything is exactly what it appears to be. You don't have equations where A is something necessary, but it's not appreciated, so you have to put a spin on it. Youth in this country are told at a very young age, you can be whatever you want to be. It's a hallmark of American freedom. And upon entering high school, they're asked to choose which courses are most likely to lead them toward their calling. And yet it is after this point that the most persistent influence begins. Academicians are promoting courses that lead to professions they deem practical. And this takes power away from people. Very few mathematicians attain individual notoriety that the pioneers of their field once enjoyed. Most jobs in math could be described as jumping through a series of predetermined hoops. That's why the jobs are so stable. But this is not power. Power is the ability to change one's situation. English. Some of these subjects are not unique in their problems and solutions. For the most part, English classes are mandatory at every level, making them a cornerstone by which a student's performance is judged. People at different reading levels are mixed together, forced to learn alongside those with half or twice their ability. And this is a problem inherent to all standardized workshops. Whoever is the most knowledgeable is the most inconvenienced. I once heard our family physician say he had to go to the stupid annual recertification all doctors are required to attend for liability purposes. Why does he think it's stupid? Because he's an expert. A working program already exists within the school to deal with this. In the foreign language department, students are allowed to place into a particular level by ability. Why can this stroke of genius not be applied to the entire curriculum? If a student's ability is greater than that offered at a particular level, there is no reason for them to take a class that is a waste of their time. Science. My field, ecology conservation, was something I was inspired to do in the backyard, not science class, which seemed like an antithesis to the natural world. Science is not a difficult field in which to inspire young people, and yet many are turned off from the subject by the tediousness in which it is presented. The impression being given to students is that the scientific world is within the classroom rather than all around them. I constantly encounter students and adults who are purely urban individuals with little knowledge of the natural world. The subject is presented only as the means to pursue a specialty career. A naturalist has to find ways to remove them from the closed environment of the classroom. The rules of a public institution. Reconstruction must begin with a redefinition of the purpose, goals, and function of an education provider. So let's answer the question, what is a public institution? The school system takes funding from all taxpayers, but is not required to ensure education for all taxpayers. If it was responsible to everyone who pays for it, it would welcome public scrutiny and influence, including that of non-patrons and patrons of other institutions. Instead, public schooling is essentially a government-funded business that acts as if it is a private enterprise. And yet it doesn't hold itself to the common standards of business either, like customer partiality. There aren't many situations in which they would admit there is a customer. Why students like school? I am not under the notion that all students are miserable and treated poorly in school. On the contrary, many seem to be satisfied and treated very well for their complacency. There are even students who consider themselves a product of public schooling and step right into the role academicians want them to because they enjoy it. How do you compare this with a student who considers himself a person before he went there, and being that person is more important to him? An adult in the same situation would have difficulty reaching an educated conclusion if he or she had as little information at their disposal as students are given in school. Decisions exchanged over their heads, etc. But maybe there are adults in this situation. Jobs where advancement is based on a points system. Housing authorities telling them what to do with their own things, etc. When asked why they like school, a common first response from students is that they get to see their friends. The problem with this answer is that it could just as easily come from a prison inmate. Indeed, they do get to see their friends, because everyone their age is forced to be there. And they too are oblivious to this confinement because they also get to see their friends. It's the only time and place where they can commune with their peers. Another common response is that they enjoy school because they enjoy learning. In my personal experience, someone who wants to learn something gets a chemistry set or a telescope or starts reading the encyclopedia at a very young age. Most of the greatest minds in any field did not wait to see the subject on a college itinerary, because choosing a field based on what you see listed on a piece of paper at age 17 doesn't meet the basic definition of the word interested. If someone tells me they like something, my question is, then why haven't you done it of your own accord, or with the help of someone who meets your individual needs? And if you already know something by the time the school comes around to teaching it, if you've read the book that literature class is going to spend a semester covering, it goes against the grain of the curriculum. The class becomes boring, a nuisance. Now, some would point out that there are students who make individual achievements and find their calling, such as the valedictorian. I would consider winning a writing or art contest to be paving your own way, drawing on abilities that would exist with or without school. But the elite students, I only know about secondhand. Perhaps someone could post some information for me. For example, do they ever ask these questions? If they did, would they still be in good standing? What makes them different besides the question? I knew a family of overachievers where the father was a superintendent, the mother was a disciplinarian teacher, and the son won superlatives in everything he did. How much of that was his choice? Academicians would like very much to see these arguments go unheard. They have a good thing going for them, although so many of their own colleagues are inconvenienced as well. It can be surmised that they don't ultimately benefit, except in their own minds so they can continue to believe what they choose. I've decided to split this chapter into two parts. I'm interested in other perspectives. If you think any of this information is out of date, if there is room for clarification or examples I don't have, please let me know.